The Three Options by Mr. Steeves. Canada's House of Commons, serving Canada for over 100 years, since four colonies, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Canada East and Canada West, joined together to form the new Dominion of Canada in 1867. But Confederation, as we have come to call this new political entity, was not always the obvious choice. In fact, it was only one of the three options. When you look at a map of British North America in 1858, you can see these three options quite clearly. The first and perhaps most obvious option for the colonies was to remain a British colony. The citizens of British North America have proven their loyalty to England quite recently, in 1812, when they could have easily supported the Americans and overturned British rule, and in 1837, when they came from all over Upper Canada to fight against William Mackenzie and his band of rebels. Had the majority of people supported Mackenzie, there's little doubt that his rebellion would have succeeded, since most of the British soldiers were in Lower Canada fighting Papineau in the Lower Canada Rebellion. But Mackenzie was stopped mostly by ordinary Canadians who still wanted to maintain ties to England. The passing of the Rebellion Losses Bill a few years later also reinforced the idea that, though the British moved slowly, they were willing to give more power to the Legislative Assembly and grant more autonomy to the colonies. A second and very viable option was to join the United States to the south. In spite of the failure of the rebellion, many people still looked longingly at the self-government and economic and political freedom of the newly formed United States of America, and many business owners conducted their business with their American counterparts. Railways, for the most part, ran north to south rather than east-west, making it easier to do business with Americans than with the other British colonies. A gradual annexation of the northern colonies to the States continued to be a real possibility. But there were still others who believed that the time had come to strike out on their own into something completely different, a union of colonies like the States, independent and strong, but unlike the States, something won by negotiation and not by blood. People in the colonies watched in horror as the free and independent states, each powerful in its own right, began to fight against each other in the American Civil War. Enticed by freedom and independence, the colonies realized the need for a strong central government, not unlike that in England, to avoid a civil war of their own. And so the third option was born, to develop a new country from sea to sea, east to west, with elements from both the American and the British system. And so the idea of Confederation was born. The three options are represented in this political cartoon from 1870. You can see the usual elements of political cartoons, the use of stereotypical images, such as the Canadian canoe and the British flag, the exaggerated physical features of the characters, such as Johnny MacDonald's crazy hair, and the juxtaposition of elements to create context, such as the tiny paddlecraft of Canada compared to the large, powerful steamer of England. In the bow of the boat, you can see good old Johnny MacDonald desperately keeping ties to the British steamer, while Prime Minister Gladstone of England happily hacks away at the now costly and cumbersome responsibilities of being in charge of a colony. The options look dire. To the south or bottom of the cartoon, you can see the American flag and Point Annexation, a rocky, turbulent destination. And to the north, in the distance, can be seen the third option, Point Independence or Confederation, equally perilous. In the center, the tension is built by the contrast of light and what is mostly dark, and by the stormy climate of the water, while the occupants of the canoe sit helplessly, oars up, out of the water as they await their fate. In some ways, we are still in that canoe, waiting to see if we indeed did make the right choice, and if in fact it was really a choice at all, hastened quickly into the future by the war to the south and the ambivalence of the English in the east. It seemed that only the open prairies to the west held any promise. So these are the three options that the colonies had available to them in 1860. It remains to this day to determine if their choice of Confederation was truly the best of the three options. Sponsored by Mr. Steve's and Gecko Steve's YouTube channel. Keep calm and get a gecko.